Okay, science students, continuing on, the next section of the nervous system is nerves. So we need to make some distinctions here, some vocabulary distinctions. So because it's confusing. So there's nerves, there's nerve cells, and there's neurons. So a nerve is a bundle of nerve cells. A neuron is the same thing as nerve cells. How do you like that? So let's just talk about a nerve. So it's a bundle of long processes, which are the long parts. So nerve cells are these very specialized cells. Remember, we learned about cells, and a cell is, it's like a circle with a nucleus inside it. It's got mitochondria, it's got organelles and stuff. Nerve cells are specialized, so they do have the little bit with the nucleus in the center and the organelles and all the stuff and all the goodies. But then the cytoplasm extends out, and it can extend out huge. Nerve cells can be gigantic, the largest cells in your body. And those are the those are the things that connect. So let's look here at nerve cells or neurons. And there are two major kinds. There are sensory neurons. Oh, I need my special thing. Does this still work? Oh, it does. So there are sensory neurons and motor neurons. And there are three parts to a neuron or nerve cell. The number one part is that's the cell part, and it's named after sort of the cell part. It's called the cell body. So that's the cell body, and in here is the nucleus and all the organelle, mitochondria, and all the things, and blah blah blah, and all the goodies. And then the cytoplasm extends out, and the cell membrane extends out into these processes or these protrusions. I don't know, what would you call a process? A process is a thing, not like a process like I'm doing a process, but like a process like a thing that sticks out. And then the very specialized cell membrane. We'll talk about that when we talk about impulse potential or potential. And there's going to be mitochondria in here. I suspect there's a lot of mitochondria in there. And so part number one is the cell body. And then the other two parts is, so the thing that sticks out and nerve impulses, so the cell membrane is very specialized here, and nerve impulses travel along the cell membrane. And if the nerve impulse is traveling along the cell membrane towards the cell body, that is called a dendrite. This section is called a dendrite. Can I zoom in on that? There we go. Look at that. Yes. That's a dendrite because the impulse is traveling towards the cell body. The impulse continues away from the cell body, and so this part is called an axon. An axon, because it's kind of action-y, because it's going away from the cell body. So this is a sensory neuron. So where this will exist and how this will work, maybe this is the skin, or this is any part where you have receptors, where you have sensors, sensory structures that are telling you, temperature sensors, pressure sensors, pain sensors, visual sensors in your eyeball. You have specialized cells that detect different wavelengths of light. So high frequency wavelengths look blue, and low frequency look red, and then middle is sort of green, and from those you make all the colors, sort of how it works. But anyways, so if those cells get stimulated, they send a signal. They send out basically what's called neurotransmitter to the dendrite. And once enough, a threshold is reached, this basically fires, and cool stuff happens, which we'll talk next time, on the cell membrane, and an impulse travels down and to the end of the cell, and then this gets passed on to wherever. This could go to the brain, parts of the brain, and tell, so this could be the thalamus and be like, I'm a sensory neuron from the eyeball, and then the thalamus is like, okay, well, I will pass on your information to the part of the brain that's the visual cortex of the brain. This could be this could be a skin pressure sensor that is where my shirt is right now, and it's constantly firing. There's a shirt, and this ends up to the pons of the brain, and the pons is like, we get it. There's shirt. It's just not important. So I'm just your messages are going to be dead. I'm going to ignore your message for now, unless you send more messages or a different frequency maybe. So that's a sensory neuron. And so what happens? So inputs from the world and to your brain, or to your this will end actually where this will end in the spinal column. Sorry, this ends in the spinal column. So this part will be really long. The dendrite will be really long, and this part will be actually short. So this will be right outside of the spinal column, and then this will enter and head to the central nervous system, and then that will travel up to the brain, to the pons or wherever. Motor neurons, this is inside the spinal column. So this is actually outside. This is inside the spinal column. And the dendrites are the dendrites are super short. This is the dendrite. So signals go in here, and then they go out along the axon. So most of this, and these axons can be super long, huge, long axons. And these will connect to sort of areas of muscle fibers. There will be muscle fibers here. And when the signal travels down across the synapse here, this is called the synaptic area. All of these, any area that's between nerves is called the synaptic area. And it tells the muscles to contract. So this, I don't know how many muscle fibers, depending on what, you'll have finer motor control, finer slow twitch muscles. There's all kinds of things like that. Like, for example, so some people can't do this. I can do this. So because when I was a kid, I practiced this. Okay. I was an only child. Okay. I had a mirror. I had to play with myself. So I can do this. I don't know how many motor neurons it takes. I can do one side sort of. Anyway, so I have motor neurons that I've developed that contract muscles here. I don't know how many motor neurons it takes to contract the few muscles that will pull my ear and make me wiggle my ear. That's my party trick. But basically, so I can send, this is somatic nervous system, I can send signals from my brain. This will be a cranial nerve that goes to then is connected to some muscle, a few muscle fibers that can make my ears wiggle. And so, so I guess some interesting stuff is, well, we'll talk. I guess we'll talk about that when we talk about how these. And then last is these interneurons, and these are in the spinal cord, and they form a direct link between sensory neurons, and so I guess it would be this part of the sensory neuron to then this part of the motor neuron, and they're used in something called a reflex arc, which I think we will be talking about. But let's just go back to, so what's a nerve then? What's a nerve? So these are nerve cells or neurons. These are nerves. And so those interneurons you're going to find in there. And then what you're going to find here in the nerves is you will find sensory neurons. So this is a mixed nerve. It's called a mixed nerve. You find sensory neurons. So sensory neurons are going to the dorsal part. And you find motor neurons running back and forth. So you got these bundles. And these go wherever. Like this one goes maybe to the top part of your arm. And then the individual motor neurons and sensory neurons branch off and connect to individual, groups of muscle fibers, groups of pain sensors, heat sensors, whatever. Each group of pain sensors, heat sensors, touch sensors will have a bunch of neurons that are connected to, and then each muscle fiber, each grouping of muscle fibers will have a bunch of motor neurons. Okay? And these go to the relatively same areas of the body, because it's just they all follow along the nerve. So a nerve is just a bundle of neurons. Some anatomy of these neurons. So that was some good anatomy. And then you can see, look, these they have these, see these little things here? These little things, these are called myelin sheaths. And so basically what myelin sheaths are, they're these fatty cells that live around, wrapped around, there it is, there's the Schwann, they're called Schwann cells. They're sort of these cells that are wrapped around the neuron. And they're kind of fatty. And what they do is, because, look, all of these guys are lumped together, they're all really close together in here, they prevent, and since the signals travel on the cell membrane of these neurons, so there's the cell membrane of the neuron, and the signals travel on the cell membrane. If you had another neuron here, there might be like signals jumping across. And if this was like a motor neuron and this was a sensory neuron, that would be bad. So you have this myelin sheath that insulates the signal. The other thing that it does is, so the impulses travel along the cell membrane and they skip the Schwann cells. So these things are called, where the Schwann cells meet, it's called a node of Ranveer. It always makes me think of a man named Raveen, who was like, in the 80s, he was a famous magician and hypnotist. And he had commercials on TV that ran all the time when he would come to your city, and they would be like, the man they call Raveen. I can't get it out of my head. I mean, it's 20, 30, I don't know how many years later. I'm sorry. Anyways, but it's not Raveen, it's Ranveer, and I'm sure it's named after the dude that discovered these things. And anyway, so the signal jumps. I don't know how it gets through the Schwann cell. I don't know what the mechanism is. There are nerves that don't have myelin sheaths, and the impulse, they're slower, is much slower. It has to travel all the way. It doesn't jump. Like worms, those worms, they don't have myelin. More primitive things don't have myelin sheaths. We evolve myelin sheaths, but we also, in our body, contain neurons that don't have myelin sheaths. Okay, let's talk. This was supposed to be the short one. Let's talk about the reflex arc. So what happens, what's a reflex arc? When you put your hand, or when you put your hand on a hot stove, or maybe let's not do electricity, but on a hot stove, what happens is the heat, there's a lot of stimulus from a hot stove, a lot of pain sensors and a lot of heat sensors are going to be firing. And so a lot of sensory neurons are going to be sending signal, a huge group of them. And they're all going to be coming from the same place, right? They're all going to be from your hand. They're all going to be coming up your arm, to the spinal cord. Where's that spinal cord? So there it is. So along that nerve, now a lot of sensory things are firing on that nerve. So a large group of pain, heat are firing. And when they get into here, so here it is, they're firing. What they do is they send out a lot of neurotransmitter, a huge dump of neurotransmitter into this space. And enough neurotransmitter that what happens is it will trigger this, a interneuron. It will reach its what's called threshold, and we'll talk about that next in the next video, what that means. But basically, enough neurotransmitter, all of a sudden, this guy's like, rah! Choo, 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 choo. This guy fires, choo. And this guy's connected to the complementary motor neurons. So remember, we've got, from your arm here, from this little part of your arm, whatever, where you're in your hand, there's all of these sensory neurons, but there's also motor neurons going to the muscles in that hand, and in between here is the interneuron. They haven't shown us the interneuron here. And so if there's enough signal, enough sensory neurons are firing. There's so much neurotransmitter that it starts to fire the interneurons, and that sends a signal out the motor neuron for muscles to contract. And it doesn't even care. And just, you do that. Now, why is this good and why do you do it? Because if you didn't have the reflex arc, so you touch the hot stove, you get sensory inputs go in. There's no interneuron, and so now they travel up. They have to travel all the way up your spinal cord, or the central nervous system. They have to, those nerves in the spinal cord. So they're traveling up the spinal cord. Then they go to the brain, and the thalamus is like, hello. Well, first I guess it'll be like the pons. The pons is like, well, I'm letting this through. This is new, so let's let this signal through. Then the thalamus is like, oh, hello, what is this? Okay, I've got pain. I've got some pressure and all of these things coming from the arm. So I'm going to go send all of those signals to the cerebrum up there. And the cerebrum is going to figure out what all of this means. At the same time, also, your eyes are probably looking at your hand burning. Smoke is coming out. So that information is being sent to your visual center. And then that is sent to the cerebrum. And your cerebrum now has to take all of those things, the smell of burning flesh, all of the pain and all of the pressure and heat, and then your cerebrum is like, all of those things add up to I'm burning my hand. My hand is burning. So now I have decided I'm going to send really nice signals down the spinal cord, down the motor neurons to the muscles, and I'm going to move my hand away nicely in a very nice coordinated way. Also the cerebellum at the back that, controls where your arm is and stuff, it's in there too. It's telling your brain, okay, your arm is down, it's over here, it's pressing on the thing. And so it's got to figure out. And obviously that takes a lot longer, and you have now burned your hand a lot more than this. This is uncoordinated. It's not anything, but it is enough to save your hand from burning. That's why the reflex arc exists, and it exists in all kinds of stuff, right? Bright light. I close my eyes to protect my eyes. I don't think about, the bright light. There's a whole gang of reflex. A strong smell. Coughing is a thing. Some people have a reflex, so a bright light, there's some kind of cross or something where it makes them sneeze. That's not a good one necessarily, but it is genetic. Whether you sneeze, if you look into the sun, if you look into like a bright light, you sneeze. I don't have that. Okay, that's it for nerves. I think that's a good anatomy function of nerves. So to summarize, neurons are nerve cells. There are three kinds. The two main ones are sensory neurons, big, long dendrite. Dendrites signals go towards the cell body. Short axon that goes into the spinal cord. The cell body's outside of the spinal cord. Interneurons are inside the spinal cord. They connect these two guys together, which are then you have motor neurons. This is inside the spinal cord. Very small, very short dendrite, long axons connected to muscle cells, and if I forgot, and glands, connected to glands, tells your glands secrete stuff. Adrenal gland, secrete stuff, make stuff and secrete it. And also they're covered in fatty myelin sheaths, which are called Schwann cells, and the Schwann cells protect the nerves from cross contamination of signal and speed up the signal traveling along the neuron. Okay, thank you.